Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for our online information session. And our session today is entitled Supporting Your Team with Self-Harm, and it's delivered today by Conway Mind. So it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Hayley and this is my colleague Emma.
Hi everyone.
And we are both mental health and wellbeing practitioners in the Young People's team here at Conway Mind.
Okay, so to give a quick overview on who we are, Common Mind, and what we do. So Common Mind, we're a mental health charity organisation, and we support both young people and adults from the age of 11 upwards. And this support can include private counselling, which is for those aged 14 upwards. This costs £50 per session, and that can be in person in our office in Abergele. It can be over the phone or by online video call. We also have some free services. So there is supported self-help, which is guided support focusing on looking at strategies to understand and cope with thoughts and feelings such as anxiety, anger, it could be bereavements and loss, or it could be low self-esteem as well. So we also do support calls, which are regular check-in calls with a practitioner to check in with how you're doing and also to support you to work towards a goal that you set. Um, we also do mental health awareness talks in school to normalise talking about mental health because we appreciate that's a really big obstacle. And we also do get active physical movement. So just like I do, bringing people together outdoors. Doesn't have to, it could be up Conwy Mountain. It can be along the promenade in Llandudno. We try to do walks in the local area, meeting a range of abilities. So that's a quick overview. We do a mix of one-to-one and group support as well. And today in this information session, just to give an idea of what we'll cover, so first we'll look at what is self-harm and why people do it, and some signs and symptoms of self-harm, so things you might be able to spot and what it might look like if someone is having difficulties, and having a conversation with the young person as well, actually having starting and approaching, having that conversation, we appreciate that can be really difficult thing to consider. Where do you even start that? Where do you go? And also to help looking at coping and relaxation strategies, things that can help to try and manage and deal with those situations when it's feeling a bit overwhelming. We'll also look at how to support the young person and also how to support yourself because you also as a parent and guardians have a really big part in this journey in this story, and it's important you have that time to look after yourselves as well. And then finally, just some further ideas of other organisations and signposting and the next steps.
But before we do any of that, really, we just wanted to start off by just recognising and acknowledging that this is potentially going to be a very difficult subject for people to think about and talk about. So we just want to put it out there about, just looking after yourself the best that you can during today's session. Obviously, this is a pre-recorded video, so pause it at any point if you need to take a break or get a drink. Yeah, please just look after yourself in the best way that you can. We're here for you. So whether you want to get in touch with us about any of the content from today's session, or after the session, if you just need somebody to talk to, or you've got concerns about, a young person in your life or for yourself with your own mental health, please get in touch with us. So all of our contact details will be at the end of this video, and they're also in the description box below. So you can email us or call us at any time. Yes, this is what we're here for. And as well, just to say that, in today's session, we want to create as comfortable and relaxed and supportive environment as possible. So just to reiterate that, we're not here to judge or evaluate anybody's parenting or anybody's, choices that they make with their children. Everybody parents differently, and that's wonderful. And we really embrace and encourage that. So yeah, just that little reminder that, today there is no sense of judgment. Look after yourself, and we're here for you if you need us. And as well, just to reiterate what a difficult and emotional topic anything to do with our children can be, but self-harm in particular, we recognise how hard this might be. During today's session, we are really keen to use clear, honest communication. So we will be modeling that in today's session, meaning we won't use any euphemisms, we will not dodge the subject in any way. Having said that, there is nothing graphic in this session. There are no photos or descriptions of self-harm injuries. Later on in the video, we will discuss some methodologies which people might use to self-harm. But prior to that slide, we will give you a specific trigger warning so that obviously if that is something that is very difficult for you, you can skip that bit, skip forward. You don't have to watch that slide if you don't want to. So yes, just a little reminder there about the kind of language that we will be using.
Okay, so now to start the information session and to jump into the topic. So what is self-harm? And just as a quote, to a description, so self-harm is when you hurt yourself as a way of dealing with very difficult feelings, painful memories, or overwhelming situations and experiences. So a way of dealing with emotions and deliberately hurting yourself is a way to cope with that.
So thinking now about some reasons why people might self-harm. So at this point, we just wanted to invite you, if you want to pause the video, have a little think for yourself, kind of reflect on what you think might be some of the reasons why people self-harm, then yeah, more than welcome to kind of pause the video, have a little bit of thinking time and then come back. So we really want to be thinking now about what are some of the possible reasons why people might self-harm. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just kind of indicative of the sorts of things that Emma and I come across in our daily work with adolescents. So sometimes people will describe self-harm as a way of expressing emotions that are difficult to put into words. Sometimes self-harm can be used as a way of transforming kind of emotional pain into something that's really tangible and visible. Sometimes the kind of emotional pain that we're going through can feel really overwhelming and it can feel really difficult to pin down, difficult to put into the right words. And being able to turn it into something that we can physically see on our bodies can be quite important for some people. Some people, when they self-harm, they describe feeling a sense of release from those emotions. And for some people, self-harm can really help in a reduction of those difficult thoughts and feelings. For some people, when they are struggling with their mental health, they might really be lacking a sense of any kind of control or stability, any kind of sense of routine or kind of reliable, they know what's coming every single day. And it might sound like a strange thing to say, but sometimes self-harm can give people back that sense of control and that sense of stability in their lives. Sometimes people will self-harm as a means of punishing themselves, either for their thoughts, for their feelings, maybe for different facets of their identity or for previous experiences that they might have been through. And kind of building on that, sometimes self-harm can be used as a mechanism to kind of escape those kinds of really overwhelming traumatic memories. And sometimes people describe feeling quite numb or quite disconnected from their bodies. And when this happens, self-harm can provide a way to kind of reconnect with their bodies and overcome that feeling of numbness. So self-harm can become quite compulsive. It can feel like there is a need or a craving to do it. And sometimes there can feel like a real sense of urgency for somebody to self-harm. One of the key things to bring up here is this notion of intent. So not everybody who self-harms does so with the intention of ending their lives. Sometimes people who self-harm may have that intention, but for a lot of people, this is not what they are trying to achieve. The intention behind their self-harm is not to end their lives. Instead, they might be trying to achieve any number of those different reasons they're listed on the screen that we've just talked through. And we think it's really important here as well to bring up this notion of attention seeking, because this is a phrase that we hear quite frequently in regard to self-harm. So, whilst we can understand why people might use this phrase, we believe that it has quite negative connotations, that might not be very helpful for somebody who is currently going through self-harm. So instead, we prefer to think of it as connection seeking, because we believe that this term reframes the behaviour in a much more compassionate way. And we think it really highlights that young person's need for recognition and for kind of a sense of belonging. Um, so connection seeking, kind of as a term, it might be one of the reasons why an adolescent is self-harming. In this kind of situation, it may be helpful to ask, what kind of connections are they missing at the moment? What's driving their behavior? Are they feeling lonely? Are they maybe feeling misunderstood, or feeling unseen, perhaps? And we've got a really nice little quote here that comes from the Mind website, that says, "It's a myth that self-harm is attention seeking, as it's often done in secret, and many people can feel shame about speaking up. However, for some people, a part of them does want someone to find out, as they might be finding it hard to put into words how bad everything in their life is feeling."
Okay, so just as a warning, we're now going to talk about some methodologies that people may use to self-harm. So please, as we said before, if you do need to step away, skip this part, or just go away from the video completely, and please absolutely do. Just make sure to take care of yourself. This is just a pre-warning now. So some methods that people may use to injure themselves could be things such as scratching or picking at the skin. It could be cutting, it could be poisoning themselves and burning their skin, overeating, undereating, hitting things or headbutting walls, using substances or alcohol and drugs. Could be having unsafe sex, could be risky behavior, such as maybe encouraging or getting into fights that maybe will cause you harm. And it could be using your hair as well, so maybe pulling or tugging hair. And also it could be over exercising to the point where it's causing you real discomfort, the amount that you've done it. And just to share some statistics with you, so cutting and scratching actually is one of the most prominent methods that people use. And recent data from research has shown that approximately 41% of people engage in cutting, 40% engage with scratching, and deliberately hitting is around about 37% of people use that method. And punching, hitting, or slapping is 34% of people, and biting is 15%, and finally, burning is 15% as well. So just to show actually um the variety of methods that people may turn to actually causing self-injury. There may be a stereotypical image that people have about what self-harm is, but there's many different ways that people may use to cause them self-injury. And just to show exactly just how many people actually, how common it is, unfortunately. And also there is a quote from someone, and it says, "I think one of my biggest barriers to getting help was to actually not admitting to myself that I had a problem. And I used to tell myself, I'm only scratching, it's not real self-harm." So absolutely, like we just said, there is that stereotypical image about what self-harm is, but anything could be scratching, pulling hair so quite frequently and hard, cause pain. And absolutely just that first obstacle of actually just voicing that something doesn't feel quite right, something is happening, and making that step of expressing that and maybe speaking to someone about that.
Okay, so thinking now, how to spot some of those signs and symptoms, what are some of the things that, as parents and guardians, we might want to be looking out for. So again, at this point, we would invite you, if you want to kind of pause the video, have a little think for yourself about, what do you think or see in terms of what might be some of the signs to look out for. So yeah, if you want to take a little break to do this, then that's absolutely fine. So in terms of kind of the signs and symptoms of self-harm, So again, by no means an exhaustive list, but we might be seeing things such as kind of unexplained marks on a person's body. So that could be scratches, cuts, bite marks, burns, or bruises. Now, obviously, all young people, they hopefully kind of do exercise. They might have like rough and tumble with their friends. They might be, having little arguments with their family, siblings and whatnot. So any kind of like little bruises here and there are absolutely kind of age appropriate, and we expect things like that in life. But when we're thinking about unexplained marks on their body, a proliferation, so a lot more than we would normally expect in new or different places, that's when we really want to be starting to think about it a little bit deeper. Covering up more. So the example we've got here is maybe like in the summer, wearing kind of long sleeves, never wearing shorts around the house when, previously they would always wear shorts, maybe becoming a little bit more covered with their body. So when they're around about the house, maybe they would normally be quite happy to walk around in their pajamas, but now all of a sudden, they want to be completely covered. They're always wearing their dressing gown. They're always kind of covering up. Just little things to kind of be mindful of. Changes in behavior. So the example we've got here, kind of experiencing angry outbursts. So really any changes from what you would consider to be the norm for your teenager. Again, kind of becoming more secretive, especially in relation to their body. That those transformations that happen to us during adolescence, part and parcel of that is that our body changes so fast, and teenagers might become a little bit more self-conscious. They might become a little bit more aware of their bodies. So certainly, if you've had a child who would always be, quite happy to, have their hair played with, or, wanting, can I have a foot rub, mum or dad? And now all of a sudden they're kind of changing that. There is a chance that that could just be part and parcel of normal teenage behavior. But if somebody is becoming quite secretive, then again, it's just something to be mindful of and just kind of see if it's part of a bigger picture, perhaps. If somebody is starting to become isolated or withdrawn, that would be, one of the signs for us as practitioners that, maybe something is going on below the surface here. Blood stains on their clothes, or maybe like bloody tissues in the bedroom or the bathroom, things again that can't be explained. Perhaps having kind of low self-esteem, or maybe saying negative things about their body. Again, adolescence is a time when we become really self-aware, really kind of conscious of our body shape and our size. So that might, that kind of behavior might be part and parcel of regular adolescent behavior for your teenager. But again, it's just something to be mindful of, and just try and place it within a bigger picture of what's going on for that person. And those kind of signs of maybe depression or low mood, so not wanting to do anything, feeling really unmotivated, very teary, very down, crying, feeling quite lonely and upset. You might see this kind of behavior-wise in kind of big changes with kind of going to school in the morning. That might become really difficult, not engaging with schoolwork, whereas previously they would always do their homework. Now it feels like a real challenge to get them to do anything, maybe not wanting to go and see their friends at the weekends, wanting to drop out of, their football club or dance club or whatever. So yeah, just kind of, like we say, starting to pick up on these little signs and symptoms and connecting the dots.
Okay, so again, at this point, we invite you, if you'd like to, in a minute or so, to pause the video. We're going to share with you kind of a hypothetical scenario, just a bit of, so you can have a bit of reflection time to see, knowing what you know right now and what we've discussed so far, how do you think you would feel if you were to encounter this situation, this scenario? How would you approach it? So I'll read the scenario, and I'll also go through some prompts, some points of things that you may reflect on in that time. You absolutely don't have to follow that if you don't want to. But this is just some ideas of how you may, some things you might think about. So if I read through the scenario. So your teen has been having a difficult time at school lately and has had a falling out with their group of friends. They seem really low and become short-tempered when you try and speak with them. They're spending more time alone in their room and they don't like doing the things they used to do that usually do, like going to football practice or going out for tea. When you're doing laundry, you've noticed a few spots of blood on some of their clothes, but you reason that they've probably fallen over. One day, they are taking their jumper off and you notice some little cuts on the inside of their arm. You ask if they are okay and they get defensive and they storm off to their room. So, some prompts are things you may think about in that scenario. Just to think firstly, what would your initial reaction be if you were to see like the blood marks or they storm off to their room when you ask them, what would your initial reaction be to that situation? How confident do you think you would feel actually handling that scenario? And how confident would you feel with that? How would you approach your team? What if is there anything you'd say, anything you'd do? How would you approach your team? And how would you emotionally be feeling kind of seeing that reaction and seeing those things? How do you think you would be feeling emotionally? And also, how do you think your teenager, your teen will be feeling as well? Having actually ha just having that's been seen and you've asked that question, how do you think they will be feeling? And absolutely any other thoughts that you think you may come to mind or you think you may have in reading that scenario, hearing that scenario, any other thoughts you may have. So please feel free to, yeah, pause the video and have a few minutes reflection time if you'd like to.
Okay, so yeah, kind of as parents and guardians, we might be starting to have a bit of an inkling now that maybe our teenager is struggling. We've got a couple of little bits of evidence we think that, oh, we've seen a couple of little marks here and there. We've noticed maybe some changes in behavior, but we're wondering how on earth do I approach having this conversation? This is going to be really difficult. So we've got some little tips here, and the main one that we would always recommend is to pick the right moment. There is potentially going to be some emotional fallout from this talk. So whether that's for them or for you yourself. So we're going to need plenty of time to have this conversation. Who knows where this conversation we're going to have is going to take us. So plenty of time, take it nice and slow. And yeah, just asking yourself, am I in the right frame of mind right now to be having this type of conversation? And if you're not, then okay, let's pick a different time instead. Giving this conversation the respect and the time that it deserves. Sometimes we would kind of recommend maybe practicing what you want to say, maybe having like a couple of key little phrases or key little sentences that you want to get across, but certainly allowing them to take the lead. Sometimes we can kind of get into that mindset where we have a script of what we want to say and we think we know what they're going to say in return. So we have it all planned out, and then real life never goes like that. And all of a sudden the conversation goes sideways because we weren't expecting it. So yeah, being mindful of these are some things I want to get across. This is kind of some key things that I want to say, but being open and flexible to let the conversation flow, and just listen. It's really easy sometimes to go as a parent and a guardian to go into like fix mode, like what's the solution? How do we fix this? And certainly, there is a time and a place for solutions and for trying to, put steps into place. But sometimes, especially right at the beginning, it's just a case of listening, and being open to what's being said. Sometimes having difficult conversations can really trigger kind of negative reactions in our teenagers. So just being prepared for maybe a little bit of anger, some denial, maybe some raised voices, maybe, walking out the room, don't want to engage. And that's all part and parcel of it. That's absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong with those reactions. It's part of the journey. Let's collect ourselves. Let's come back to it later on. So just kind of having an awareness that this might happen, just a little bit of time to prepare for that. Again, kind of staying calm, take your time. It's a really difficult conversation. Don't rush it, try and be in the moment and try and be really present. Going back to something we said right at the beginning of this about, don't beat around the bush. We want to model clear, direct language. Sometimes we all interpret things differently. And one of the phrases that we hear a lot in relation to things like this is about doing something silly. What does that mean? You know, I might think that means something very different to what you might think. And then that's the kind of situation that is ripe for miscommunication. And we're just going in two opposite directions. So, as hard as it is, try not to use euphemisms, try not to kind of circle around the subject. You know, we want to use clear, direct language, and the best way to achieve that is for us to model it ourselves. Um, you know, offering different ways to talk. So whether that's, you know, let's go for a walk, let's go take the dog for a walk or go for a drive. Anything like that is really, really good. But also offering, you know, do you want to write it down? Do you want to send me a WhatsApp message? Do you want to do me a voice note? Like, what's going to work better for that person? In the midst of having that really difficult conversation, if you can, just trying to put your emotions on the back burner until later on. That's not to say that your emotions are not incredibly important, because they absolutely are. But in that moment, we really want to try and stay within that adolescent frame of mind. So just keeping the focus on them. And obviously, as a parent or a guardian, you're going to feel sad, you're going to feel upset, you might feel a bit frustrated, you might feel this whole range of emotions, and that's okay as well. But just trying to keep them in check just while we're in this really difficult conversation, and then we can try and come back to that later and process those emotions. Um, and as we said here, it's okay if you don't know the answer to something. I'm a big believer that actually being honest with our teenagers is a really, really good way of building up trust. You know, to turn around and say to your teenager, do you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but let's go and have a look together. Let's go and, you know, go and sit on the computer together. We'll go and have a look at some websites. We'll go and speak to some people together. It just puts you on the same team, and it just shows that you're human as well, and that, you know, even if you don't have all the answers, you're there for them. You are part of this journey with them. Talking to them about what we call the backup team, which is basically just who is in your life. You know, if you as a parent or guardian are at work and you can't have that conversation right now, which happens, it happens to absolutely everybody, and that's okay. Who can they turn to? Who's in their backup team? So whether that's aunties, uncles, siblings, best friends, who have they got that they can talk to? And as well, perhaps, you know, speaking to school to see if there have been any changes in their behaviour that you should be aware of, and, you know, any additional support that school might be able to put in place as well. Sometimes knowing, you know, what are those first words that I should say? It's like, where do we start having this really difficult conversation? So we've just got some, you know, possible little pointers here. So, you know, I was wondering, I've noticed, reiterating, you know, I'm not mad, I'm not disappointed, I'm not upset with you, you're not in trouble. Kind of reinforcing that idea that, you know, keeping you safe is the most important thing to me. We want to be asking open-ended questions. So, you know, what does that feel like? How do you feel about it? Can you describe it for me? And again, coming back to that sense of we're in this together. You and I are on the same team. You know, it's not you versus me. We're not, you know, at loggerheads over this. We're on the same side. And, you know, when we're inviting somebody to talk to us and to share these really personal and private emotions, the words that we use are really important. So trying to be non-judgmental, thinking about the possible implications of the words that we use. So going back to what we were saying before about that phrase, attention seeking, you know, there are implications with that phrase, and there are connotations that go with that phrase that might not be very productive in, you know, a difficult conversation. So yeah, taking our time, thinking about the right words, and it's okay if we say the wrong word. It's okay if we say something, we can backtrack and say, oh, actually, that wasn't the word that I was wanting to use, or that word didn't fully express what I wanted to say. Let me try and find another word instead. It's okay to do that. So we might implement all of these little tricks and tips and still find that it's really difficult for our teenager to open up to us. So we thought that it might be helpful to just go through what might be some of the barriers that are, or that might make it difficult for a teenager to open up. So yeah, like we say here, you might use all of these strategies and it might still be really hard. So one of the reasons why could be stigma. Now, obviously, I think as a society, we're doing a lot better in terms of kind of mental health stigma. Um, but sometimes it's easier to say, oh, other people's mental health, I'm really there for them. I think talking about mental health is wonderful. But for some reason, when it turns in on ourselves and we have to do the talking about how we feel, there can still be an element of embarrassment or shame there. So just being mindful that even the most open-minded, stigma-free of people can still have that little nugget inside them that's like, oh, it's still so hard to talk about how I feel. Guilt as well. This is something that we see in our work with adolescents. So whether that's a sense of, I shouldn't be feeling like this, what right do I have to feel this way? Or, that old phrase, other people have got it much worse than me. So that guilt that I shouldn't be experiencing this. Sometimes with teenagers, they worry that if their parents find out, they don't want I don't want mum to worry about me. I don't want dad to worry about me. So there's that sense of guilt of, putting pressure on mum and dad. So just being conscious that, those might be the kinds of emotions that they're dealing with. There might be a sense of fear and uncertainty. If I open up on this subject, if I tell my parents or my guardian that I'm self-harming, gosh, what's going to happen next? Where do we go from here? So that sense of uncertainty about what the future might hold if they talk about their self-harm. Sometimes we don't know how we feel. Sometimes our emotions are just like this great big bundle of really overwhelming, confusing thoughts and feelings, and we can't pick it apart and we can't really verbalize it very well. And this is especially true of self-harm. People might be self-harming and they don't even know why they're doing it themselves. They can't pinpoint or verbalize what are they getting out of this, what is driving them to do it. So that sense of I can't find the right words. I don't even know why I'm doing this. That can be a really big barrier because there's that fear of if I can't clearly communicate this, I might be misunderstood. So yeah, just that sense of I don't even know how I feel myself. And finally, people might be experiencing a fear over losing ownership or losing control of their lives. So when we hold something within us, we can feel in control of it. And we can feel like this is my thing, this is my personal private information about my mental health, and my self-harm is part of that. And I'm going to hold that really, really tightly. There's a fear that once it's gone, once we've opened it, we can't put it back in again. It's that Pandora's box thing. Once it's open, we can't put it back in. What's going to happen next? If I tell dad, will he then go and tell mum? Will my brothers and sisters know about it? Will my aunties and uncles know about it? So that fear of everybody kind of coming in and taking something that's really, really personal, really, really private, and losing control of it. So yeah, we might implement all of these different communication strategies. And we might still find that it's really, really difficult to bridge that gap between us and our teenagers. And this might be some of the reasons why. So it might just be helpful to just be aware of why it might be difficult for your teenagers to talk.
Okay, so now this bit is going to be talking about how to support the young person, the adolescents. So the first thing could be addressing any underlying issues. So it could be the reasons and the issues which actually led the young person to actually believe that the option they had was to harm themselves. So it could be things such as maybe they felt lonely, maybe they had some negative critical thoughts about themselves a lot, some low self-esteem. Maybe it was just a build-up of stress and frustration for whatever reason, whether it's friendships, relationships, school stress, just that build-up, that snowball inside. It could be maybe peer pressure, maybe they've seen other people do it or aware of other people doing it and decide they want to do themselves to feel like they fit in. So it could be one aspect of looking at these underlying issues just to see what led them to make that decision to injure themselves. And that could be through discussion with yourselves as parents and guardians. It could be also with external support. Maybe it's an organization like Young Minds, or whether it's maybe speaking to someone like me and Haley. It could be conversation, or a school-based counsellor. It could be through many different ways of starting that conversation. But also one thing is looking at wound care. So it's really important that not to ignore any wounds just because they've been caused by self-harm, no matter how small they might seem and how difficult it may be to actually admit maybe what caused them and to get support for that. Actually, they may and may need cleaning and caring for to prevent infection. And usually it's suggested it should be kind of kept clean, dry, sterile dressings, really clean. And you can always seek medical assistance if you're unsure, like A&E, 111, 999. You can always seek their advice if you're unsure. And yeah, just that main thing, just keeping it as clean as possible and taking care of that wound. Yeah, so that's one of the things, wound care.
Okay, so thinking now about triggers and really working with your teenager to identify their triggers. So triggers will be different for each person, and they might change day to day. They might change in different contexts or different situations. So, for example, going into one particular shop might be a really big trigger for your child, but going into another shop that on the surface seems very similar, but that one's okay. Triggers aren't always logical, and sometimes we can't rationalize them. So just trying to work through them, and then planning for those situations. So if we know that going into school assembly could potentially be a trigger for your teenager, thinking, okay, when might this situation happen? How do you feel in that situation? Is there anybody that you could speak to? What could you do to help yourself in that moment? And is there anywhere that you can go? So is there a safe space nearby? So for example, like we say, going into the assembly hall, maybe having a chat with the pastoral team at school, knowing, okay, who can I go and talk to? Who's my kind of designated person who knows me really well, who knows my situation? Is there a really nice, quiet classroom that I can go to kind of work through these emotions and to sit with these emotions? So yeah, kind of planning for those situations. And some kind of common triggers that we see, it could be anxiety around exams, social situations. It could be potentially maybe a grief or bereavement situation that triggers self-harm. As Emma said before, kind of issues around relationships, issues relating to food or eating, perhaps. Yeah, there's kind of a multitude of different possible triggers, but it's just having those conversations with your teenager to try and identify what their triggers might be, and then having a bit of a plan of action of how to deal with that. So when we have had those discussions, what we really, in an ideal world, want to do is put it all together in what we call a safety plan. So when we are in the midst of these really overwhelming thoughts and feelings, and this impulse to self-harm feels really quite urgent, we're probably not going to be able to think rationally at that point. So if somebody is really in the depths of those feelings and we turn around and say, okay, who's your person? Who are you going to call? What's their phone number? All that information is gone because I'm so stuck in the moment. So if we can put it all down together on a piece of paper, it's really helpful because it means that when we're in those difficult moments, rather than trying to think, okay, what helps me? What helped me last time? Which breathing technique was good? We've got it all written down on a piece of paper that we can keep with us. We can take it to school, we can keep it in our bag, we can do whatever we need to. So in the description box below, we'll give you a link to a website that has kind of templates of safety plans that you can do for different triggers, and you can do for different issues that people might be facing. But yeah, in essence, it is just a document where you can put down who are your safe people, who are your safe places, are there any phone numbers that you might need, are there any external organisations, so maybe people like Samaritans perhaps, have you got their phone number to hand? What can you do to keep yourself safe in that moment? So what are the really good comforting techniques for you. So whether that's having, some really nice soft fabric and you know that that's very comforting for you. What's some good distraction for you? So some really funny videos on YouTube, have all of that stuff written down. What's the good music for you to listen to? What's the good food and drink for you to have in these moments? Have it all down. And as well, it might be helpful to put down in your safety plan, do you have access to anything which could be used to harm yourself at this point? Can this be moved? Can we do something different with it? So yeah, it's just a safety plan is a nice little way of having all of your support mechanisms all in one place on one document so that, like I say, when you're in the midst of those really overwhelming thoughts and it's really difficult to think straight, you can turn to your safety plan and everything that you need is going to be on there.
Absolutely. And also, one thing is when we're overwhelmed with so many different emotions, sometimes we may even injure ourselves even more than we intend to, and we're not aware of what we're doing. And all of a sudden, when we come back to realize, actually, oh, I've actually done myself quite serious harm. So things like the plan and strategies that we're going to later can be really, really important in those moments to help us get through that moment and just stop and think, actually, what am I doing? So one thing that one person you could talk to is the GP. And just to give a general idea, again, this isn't absolutely guaranteed and may be different for everyone, but just a general idea of what you may experience if you do speak to the GP. So it could be a wound check and care, just checking that they're healing okay and just how they are. A general check of the person's physical health and how they are at the moment. It could be a discussion around their mental health and well-being at that time. And if wanted and needed, could be signposting and information towards some appropriate service support. And it could be potential check-in calls with, say, a nurse or a practitioner at the GP, just to continue to check on your well-being and how you are. And it can be really helpful, like I mentioned before, to sometimes plan that conversation and actually what you'd like to say, because sometimes when we're in that situation and we're faced, sat with the doctor, it can be really, really overwhelming. And in that stress, our mind can go completely blank, actually, what we wanted to say. Sometimes having that planning it, say, together, you and the young person, and just planning that conversation, maybe even rehearsing the conversation. And maybe even having someone there with you with support, just to appreciate it can be really stressful, difficult step and situation to face, reaching out to speaking to someone. And as well as the GP, there are some options that are available in terms of support. So typically there are things such as kind of a talking therapy, so typically a school counsellor in a school, and other talking therapy such as or support organisations through like Common Mind as well. And there are always there is the idea of medication, there is that route as well, which can be suitable for some as well. And there are also things like online forums where you can talk to other people, maybe going through a similar situation. And it could be things such as self-help, so looking at strategies and resources online, self-help organisations and resources that you can use, read through in your own time by yourself. Could be, again, support for any underlying issues, whether it's bullying or self-esteem, anger. Again, that could be through counselling or through talking to another organisation. And it could also, another support option is a referral to secondary services such as CAMHS, which you would access through the GP, to have that access of support.
Okay, so thinking now, how do we cope and how do we deal with these really big, overwhelming urges that we might be having to self-harm, or just this kind of myriad of like really overwhelming thoughts and emotions? So we've always got kind of creative techniques that we can fall back on. So things like painting, drawing, using Play-Doh, writing things down, listening to music, whether that's music that reflects how we feel right now, or whether it's music that we're trying to emulate. So if it's, quite happy, quite cheery music, that's what we're trying to get to. doing anything really, things like cooking, writing stories, poems, diaries, scrapbooks, anything like that. Watching some kind of funny or uplifting videos online, that can always be a really nice one. Just, 5-10 minutes break from your thoughts just to watch something a bit funny on YouTube. And as well, we do teach kind of mental games for people to play. So things like the alphabet or the color game, we'll play the alphabet game. We'll say, okay, tell me an animal for every letter of the alphabet. And these little things, they might seem like quite childish or like quite young games that we play with people, but anything that is going to use their brain and allow them to just have a little bit of respite from the thoughts that are going through their heads. It's a really good little distraction technique. What I would say is kind of when it comes to things like writing down how we're feeling, having that conversation with your teenager around, okay, what do you want to do with that piece of paper once you've done it? So if somebody is journaling how they're feeling, sometimes that fear of, oh gosh, what if, I write down all these thoughts and feelings and then somebody finds it? That fear that someone might find their paper can prevent people from even starting to write it down. So just having that conversation up front, do you want me to look at it afterwards? Do you want to put it in the bin? Do you want to put it in the shredder? And having that conversation as part and parcel of, okay, what are we going to try and do to express these thoughts and feelings? We've got a couple of different calming techniques that we can utilize. And, these are the kind of things that Emma and I will teach to teenagers when we're working with them. So we've got a couple of different ideas here. So one of the nice relaxation strategies that we do is called hand breathing. In the description box below, we've got a link to a demonstration of this. But basically, it just entails holding your hand out, taking the finger from your other hand at the bottom of your thumb, and just tracing the outline of your finger as you're breathing in and out. So breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out. And this is a really, really nice technique because, people can do it in school, they can do it in class. Nobody needs to really know that they're doing it kind of, quietly down the side of their desk or what have you. Not only are you going to get 5, really nice, calming, long breaths, but just that little bit of physical touch can be really comforting for some people. So yeah, sometimes people will go around their fingers, sometimes people will go like this. Anything like that can be really, really comforting and really relaxing. Another little breathing strategy that we'll teach is called box breathing. So we'll invite people to imagine a square and starting at the bottom left-hand corner and kind of breathing in for the count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, holding it for 4, breathing out for 4, and holding it for 4, and making that square as they're breathing as many times as they need to before they start to feel that everything is calming down a little bit. Some people will shape it as they do it. Some people will shape it in their hands. Some people will get their phone and trace the outline of their phone as they're breathing in and out. Yeah, anything like that is a really good way of just calming down our breathing. Another nice little technique which we teach is called nostril breathing. And this is a really good technique for bedtime. It can help to get off onto a really good night's sleep. Again, we've got a link to a demonstration video in the description. But it basically involves taking your thumb and your forefinger and covering alternate sides of your nose as you're breathing in and out. So we cover the right-hand side, breathe in, switch, and breathe out. Breathe in on that side, switch, and breathe out. So we are kind of breathing in an upside down V shape. That's the kind of shape that we're going for. And yeah, like I say, this is a really, really good technique, especially for bedtime. So just these little calming relaxation techniques. Sometimes people might be a bit resistant to trying them because it seems like, oh, well, how is, breathing going to help? But it really, really does. And the more that we can implement these, just throughout the day, don't wait until we're feeling really, really tense and really, really stressed. Do them as often as we can during the day, and then it'll become like second nature.
Okay, so another idea is muscle relaxation. So this comes from the idea that when we're feeling maybe anxious or overwhelmed, we can hold ourselves in quite a tense way and be really tense and we might not even realize it. So the idea is that you tense go through different areas of your body, tensing different areas of your body. Not for too hard, not for too long, say for 10 seconds. And it's just, and then reflecting on how it feels when after your body's been deliberately tense and then relaxing that and letting it go. Maybe even imagining throwing those thoughts and feelings out of your body and outside. So it could be putting your hands into fists, say for 10 seconds, and then just letting your hands relax and let that go. And again, just thinking how that feels after being deliberately tensed and then relaxing that. How does that feel? And it could be lifting your shoulders up towards your ears, putting your face into a frown, just moving through different areas of your body, tensing it a few seconds at a time and seeing how that feels. And building on the idea of relaxation breathing, again, as Haley said, appreciate it can sound something that's really simple and we just breathe, we just do it. But sometimes those simple things can be really, really useful and just doing something that we use every day to make it feel a bit more achievable and possible and build that motivation. And also, I mean, appreciate with any of these strategies, our thoughts may wander, and it's absolutely okay. It's just if we do notice that, then if we can, bringing ourselves back to the exercise. And also with breathing, because it is something we just generally do, sometimes it can help if we're going to pay focus to it, just having something that can help us maintain that focus and attention. So picturing something, so it could be something like with the balloon. So imagine that your stomach is a balloon, and each time you take a deep inhale and you breathe in deeply, the balloon inflates and gets bigger. And each time you take an exhale, you breathe out, the balloon gets smaller, so deflates. So you're just looking at focusing on how what the stomach looks like and how it moves as you breathe in and out, and this balloon inflates and deflates. And there is the idea of grounding techniques. So it's so easy to live life just on autopilot. So we get through day to day, just doing what we need to do, and we don't actually pay attention to who and what's around us. So this is to help pay more attention to our surroundings, our senses, and actually bring ourselves back to the moment. So absolutely, and it could be again using everyday things. Doesn't necessarily have to be when you're sat down in a room by yourself in a quiet space, because that isn't always possible. It could be as you walk in a building or outside, just thinking about your senses. So what can you see, feel, hear, smell, and taste? And it could even be like with the five senses. So thinking of five things you can see, four things you can feel, three things you can hear, two things you can smell, and one thing you can taste. So it could be, can you see any dogs walking by? Can you see any traffic? What colour cars are there? If you're sat down, how does the chair feel underneath you? Or what clothes are you wearing? Is it a soft dressing gown or is it maybe a raincoat? What does the clothes feel like that you're wearing? Just generally paying attention to those senses.
So, kind of specifically now to self-harm, we wanted to talk about some possible replacement techniques that people could use instead of, the kind of harmful behaviors that they might be utilizing at the moment. So, when we are doing or thinking about these kind of replacement techniques, what we're trying to create is a strong sensation in our body that will replace the harm that we normally do. So we want that strong sensation in our body without hurting ourselves. So some of the techniques that kind of we recommend and that National Mind recommend is to hold a piece of ice either in your hand or your mouth, maybe rub it on your arms, wherever somebody would normally self-harm, perhaps rubbing ice on that, drawing on yourself with a red pen. So this can kind of emulate the self-harm that people would do maybe by cutting or scratching. And you can be really creative with this. So any kind of scribbles that you want to do over your skin, it might look funny, but it's saving you from kind of hurting yourself. Putting your hands in kind of freezing cold water. Again, that sense of the strong physical sensation in our bodies without hurting ourselves. That thing that I'm sure loads of us did when we were younger, so covering our hands in PVA glue and then peeling it off, that can be really satisfying for a lot of people. maybe having a shower perhaps. So, we would never say kind of a cold shower, but maybe having it slightly cooler than you normally would, or having a really nice warm bath, something like that, something that's going to be really sensory for you. Sometimes people will get a hair dryer, and sometimes you get that cool button on the hair dryer. So placing your finger on the cool button and then kind of wafting it in front of your face, that can be really kind of like very stimulating for a lot of people, obviously without the harm that you might do if somebody was self-harming. Getting outside is wonderful. So whether or not that's just going for a little walk or even just going and sitting on the step in the back garden, just getting outside, especially if it's windy, again, that sense of kind of that feeling on your skin can be really, really refreshing. Loud music or quiet music, anything really, anything that's going to help to take our minds away from the self-harm that we are kind of feeling the urge to do. As we said before, textures are wonderful. So whether it's things like a scarf, so maybe something really soft like a blanket or a teddy, or like a fleecy dressing gown perhaps, or maybe rough textures as well. So sometimes people like having like a bracelet with beads on and kind of playing with those really hard, the beads on their bracelet. Eating or drinking something with a strong sensation. So whether that's having a cold drink straight out the fridge, or a nice warm cup of tea, eating something with a strong flavor. So maybe things like something really minty, that can be good. So just having some chewing gum in your bag, that kind of thing can be really grounding to get back into your body and kind of try and get out of your head a little bit. Any kind of physical movement, so screaming, shouting, dancing, singing, that old cliche of getting a pillow and screaming into it, it works wonders. There's a reason why people do it. So certainly anything like that where we're going to get all of those feelings expressed outwards. And maybe putting some tiger balm on the place where you would normally harm as well. So again, that sense of the physical sensation in our body, it's really grounding. It helps to turn the volume down in our minds. We are getting the same positive outcome, but without having the obvious harm that would normally come from whatever self-harm technique we would use. When we are kind of, as practitioners, are working with young people, we will try and speak to them about, what is life in general looking like for you at the minute. So we do something called ACEs, which we know in different mental health circles has different terminology, different definitions. But, for the purpose of this, we think of ACEs as achievement, closeness, and enjoyment. So we'll ask people, during the span of your week, what do you do that you really enjoy? Are you getting a sense of achievement during the week? How are you close to other people? We might ask teenagers to keep a diary to kind of keep track of their ACEs and find out, am I doing nice things for myself during the week? Sometimes it can just be a chat that we have. You might want to have this conversation with your teenager yourself, but just reflecting on like, what's the week looking like for you at the minute? And the basics. So sometimes we call these the foundations as well. So again, when we're getting to know teenagers, these are the kind of things that we really want to know about. We want to know, what's your sleep pattern looking like? Are you not going to sleep until the early hours of the morning? Are you sleeping through the night? Are you napping during the day? What's your diet looking like? Certainly not having to eat healthy food all the time, but, is there some sense of, not just eating junk food all the time? What is that looking like for you? What's your eating pattern like? Are you eating meals, or are you just having lots of little snacks during the day? Exercise as well. So by no means, do we expect people to be off running marathons all the time, but it's good for us to just have a sense of, is there some kind of movement that's happening for you during the week, even if that's just walking to school in the morning, or going to PE class. Routine as well. This is something that we will ask people about. Everybody thrives and enjoys different levels of routine. Some people need a really strict routine every day. Other people hate routine. But there is a sense that just a little bit of kind of foreknowledge of what does the day entail? What does my week generally look like? You know, by no means does everybody have to have a strict routine of when they eat and when they sleep and the places that they go. But if somebody's life is really chaotic and there is no sense of structure, that might be an indication to us as practitioners that maybe there's something there that we want to have a bit more of a think about. And connections as well, like how are they connecting with other people? Are they connecting with other people? And again, this doesn't mean, going out to parties with friends all the time and things. It could just be something as simple as, are you eating your evening meal with the rest of your family, or are you eating it on your own in your bedroom? Are you spending time in the living room with everybody else, or are you in your bedroom all the time? So just little things like that. So when we are, like I say, trying to get to know someone, we'll have a think, or we'll have a chat to them about what's your achievement, closeness, and enjoyment looking like, and what are your basics looking like at the minute? Are there any little tweaks that we could make there, just to try and get those foundations right? Because obviously, if some of these foundations are not right, it's kind of indicating to us that maybe that's something that needs to be addressed. And we've got a nice little quote here as well from a journal that just says, putting any items that you would self-harm with in a difficult to access location or in a box with tape around it, giving you time to think about whether it's something you really want to do. So this might be a nice little technique to use, just to give you that little bit of breathing space and that little bit of thinking time. Do I really want to do this? Do I really want to self-harm right now? We would recommend kind of, I can guess that the impulse as parents would be to take away any implements that somebody might potentially self-harm with. What we would recommend for that is to have that conversation with your young person. What we really want to achieve here is that you're on the same team, you're on the same side, so it doesn't feel like mum or dad or whichever adult in their life has come along and taken their self-harm implements. That feels like me versus you, us versus them. We want to be making these decisions together. So having that really open and frank conversation around implements, and if we take them away, if we remove them from the house, is that going to be good for you? Let's make this decision together. But certainly something like putting those items in a hard to reach space just gives you that little bit of breathing time to just think, okay, can I make a different decision here?
Okay, so now we've spoken about how to look after the young person. Now it's also about looking after yourself because you have such an important role in this journey. So it's really important to look at looking after you as well. So some suggestions that we have. Firstly, self-care. So having some time for you at some point in the day, in the week, even if it's just sitting there having a warm drink or tea, just something, a space for you. And absolutely all the techniques and ideas that we've suggested, like relaxation, calm techniques, any of the things we've suggested can also apply to you as well. It's not just for the young person, it can be used by you and by adults as well. And it's absolutely okay. And if what is happening at the moment is making you feel maybe distressed or anxious, it's absolutely okay. And it could be things like talking to someone you trust, maybe connecting with other parents, maybe it's having some individual support from an organisation like Calm My Mind or another organisation having that individual support for you. It could be speaking to a work colleague or maybe speaking to someone in school. And it could also be making contact with your own GP if you think you have any concerns around your own mental health. Because the main thing is that self-understanding and self-kindness, because we appreciate it can be so easy to have those expectations and pressure ourselves into doing or saying the right thing, and we have to do something, we need to do this now. And really all we can do is our best. Absolutely, like you taking the time to listen to this webinar today and taking that big step. And again, we appreciate and thank you for taking the time to do that. Absolutely, it can be so easy to have that pressure. We're just saying we're only human. We're absolutely doing everything we can, and sometimes all that's needed is just someone to be there to listen to the person. Doesn't necessarily have to be something that's done or a solution found at that moment. sometimes all that's needed is just someone there to listen and to kind of acknowledge, yeah, they believe them. They acknowledge those thoughts and feelings a person is having. So yeah, just having that space for you and just self-kindness and understanding and seeking support if you feel you need to or want to. And like the quote says at the bottom, you can't pour from an empty cup. So making sure you feel you have that support around you as well. You have that network you can turn to while supporting the young person through this difficult time as well. And in terms of getting more help, you can certainly speak to, and the young person can speak to things like the GP, the school pastoral officer, it could be things like a social worker or family worker, a CAMHS practitioner, which you speak to the GP first to get that referral. And there is also information on the Young Minds website. Again, we'll include any resources like information or links or videos that we mentioned in this information session today in the link below in the description for this session. And it could be things like apps as well. So it could be a Calm Harm app or Tell Me or Distract, which just helps you to first track your mood and also can help you to monitor, help you in that process of maybe doing some relaxation breathing and using some relaxation strategies. They're just things you can turn to. And there are also helplines if you feel you want to urgently speak to someone, like a shout text line, which is at 24/7 all year round. Someone will be there to speak to you, whether it's by text. And there is also Childline, which has both a telephone line for both young people and for parents if you feel you want any advice or have any concerns. And the same with Papyrus. They are able to speak to both parents and young people if you feel you have a concern about your young person, and they speak to young people up to the age of 35. And again, things like Samaritans. So there's also those helplines that you can reach out to if you feel you urgently want to speak to someone. And places like the Samaritans open 24/7 all year round. And we are also here, Conwy Mind, to provide that one-to-one or group support. And we aren't a crisis service, so we do suggest if you do need any immediate and crisis urgent support, we do suggest you go to A&E, call 999 or 111, those emergency service numbers. And our information is there on the screen if you feel you have any questions at all from watching this today. And so our contact number and our email address, and also our website, which has all our service information and an up-to-date calendar as well, but any activities or events that we have. But just to say finally, Diolch, and thank you so much everyone for all your time and for being here today. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
So everyone, take care. Bye.
Bye.